Well, here comes part 3. I'm starting this a little later than I thought I would. The bug that I thought I had thoroughly defeated earlier in the week returned with all of its little buddies, and so I spent the morning not wanting to get too far away from certain parts of the house. But I'm going to give this a shot, and I'm going to try really hard to get the rest of the depth of field assignment critiqued and then do the focus stack tomorrow. So here we go with part 3. Let's get it underway. A shallow depth of field shot with the lemons or limes or whatever those are on the tree. Being a carnivore, I confess an enormous inability often to identify various items that aren't born with a face on them. I think this is a very nice example of minimal depth of field. The over here, we could have the lyrics to the song Lemon Tree on this. It would make an interesting poster. And you could turn this into a commercial product. If this were going to be a standalone shot, then this area, here's where the photo is. This is definitely not a long horizontal shot, so I would probably have cropped it more like this. And that way it would let us concentrate on the items on the tree. And as we've done in the past, I would most likely darken these edges. So we have a couple of issues with that. Part of it's easy. Some of the other parts aren't going to be. So I'll show you a trick for that. I'm just going to use the burn tool because it's fast and easy to darken down this other parts of the background. We'll leave that front leaf pretty much intact. Okay, so now we have the lemons or limes or whatever they are standing out really well. But we've got these hot spots that might be nice to tone down, but we want to tone them down in a way that fits with the natural colors in here. In the small highlights in here, you can see how those have actually created little apertures for the shot. Cut down the light, and you're seeing that light through them. Well, let's pick up on that. I'm going to use the paint dropper tool to pick up that color, which is an interesting color. Put it in the foreground brush, pick up a brush, set my opacity way down, not way down, but maybe 20%, and tell this to darken. So it will only paint on the color of the brush and lighter areas. So I can paint over this whole thing, and you can see that the white areas are starting to get a little darker as I hit this multiple times. And down here, I can take away some of that high shine with a color that really kind of works. Now, if I chose to, I could go back to the burn tool and darken those down even a little more. So that now the background looks natural and the fruit on this tree looks the way it's supposed to. So let's go on. Well, here we have a very nice view of lifeguard station number 5. with a very nice sunset. A pastel thing. This would make an interesting pastel painting in these light colors. It's not garish, it's soft, it's quiet. Very nice, very painterly thing. I'm going to go in and create just a tiny bit of vignetting here to put our focus a little more where I think it belongs. I want to do this subtly. I don't want to get crazy with this. Let's see if we made any difference. I'll do this snapshot of it. There was the original. There's with a little bit of vignetting. And I think it tends to work a little better. It's subtle. You were well on your way to an exquisite piece here. This is very, very nice. Nice depth of field. So all we did was enhance it just a little bit. Now what we might do is see if we can enhance some of this. See over here the kind of pink color in these clouds? I'm going to make an additional layer. This is a blank layer. And I'm going to pick up this color. Let's see what it actually is. Okay, it's kind of a grayish red. I'm going to pick up that red a little more brightly than it is, because it's awfully gray. And now, on this top layer, I'm going to put the brush back to normal, set the opacity this time truly way down to maybe 10%. Put my brush on color. And remember, I'm painting on this top layer. I'm going to make the brush a bit smaller. And I'm just going to put a little of that color in here. Again, not a lot, just a little. I can use a layer mask to take a little of that overspray, as it were, out from there. Because I really only wanted the color command really helped. I didn't get a lot of that color in this building. Just the tiniest amount. If I have too much here, I can go to the opacity and drop it all out. But I think it really adds a little of that foreground. So that's our finished product. We'll flatten it, create a snapshot, take a look at it, see what we have. Here's our original. There was with the vignette. There was with a little of that pink color added to the sky. By using that blank layer on top, we can paint on that and do wonders for the underneath painting. And because of the opacity ability, we can make it a little bit, a tiny bit, or a lot. And using the color style, we can be very selective in how we paint. So give that a try. Okay, let's go on. Two good ones so far. Well, here we have some nice flowers against an interesting background. I don't know whether that's a flag in the background or a building with just red and white stripes, but it goes along with the flowers. The narrow depth of field helps. I think in this case it would be nice if all of these flowers were sharp, and then it started going out of focus with the stems here. But there's only a couple of subtle things I would do to this. I might try to brighten it just a little with a levels adjustment first. So let's go image adjustments. I'm sorry, I meant a curves adjustment. I'm going to bring the brights up a little bit, everything else down a little bit, maybe not that much. Now you'll notice this is a very, very subtle curve, but it is no longer linear. We'll say OK. Now once again I'm going to bring a little of this down so our flowers stand out. And then I've got two distracting elements I want to get rid of. One of them up in this corner, the other one down here in this red area. I'm going to use the clone stamp tool. I probably could do that with the spot healing brush, but I think I'll use the clone stamp tool for this. I'm going to hold down the Alt and Option key to pick up the color. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. I think I'll get rid of this little whatever this is over in the corner as well. And now, once again, let's look at a before and after, see if we helped it or hurt it. Here was our before. There's our after, with not too much work, but a little just to spiff it up. One of the things as you go on and really start practicing these things, you'll learn that it sometimes is a big jump from a mediocre or an average photograph to a good one. But from a good one to a really good one is sometimes a very small jump, very small effort being applied. So let's do another one. Well, here we have a deep depth of field shot. It looks like this house has its own bus stop. I don't really know what this building is, but it certainly looks like a bus stop or a way station or a little party room. This is really interesting out on this sidewalk. The doors open almost into the wall in this garden. Fascinating little extra structure stuck in there. I have no idea what it's for. The only thing I would probably do is get rid of a little of this foreground. Your exposure is very good on everything else. This break in the foreground is a little distracting, so I might bring that up to there. I'd leave the sky where it is. Now I would straighten these walls. The wide angle that you're shooting with is distorting them. So we'd go to Select All. You could also do this with a Control or Command A. We'll go over to Edit, Transform, Skew. The little handles appear. I'm going to bring in a guideline from the border so I can see what I have to do here. Bring that one out. Bring that one out. Hit Enter to take all of that. Select, deselect, which could also be a Control or a Command D. And then we'll go up and clear the guides, which you've got to do with the menu. And now we have a much straighter look for it. So here's, once again, here is our before. And there's our after. Again, very subtle. Very little work done to this, but it just made it look a little better, made it look a little straighter, more architectural. Generally speaking, for architectural work, buildings, houses, bridges, any of that kind of thing, unless you are purposefully attempting to create a wide-angle distortion with it to force the perspective. Unless you're doing that on purpose, it is almost always better to straighten up those lines. Now, if you had a tilt-shift lens or we're shooting with a view camera, no problem. You do that in the shot. If you don't, we're forced to do it in post. It's not the best way to do it. If you have the option, take it. But if you don't, and you have to do it in post, then go ahead and make that work. Okay, let's look at another one. Well, this is an interesting shot of the flowers against the painting, the somewhat Mondrian-esque painting in the background. It's a nice concept, a way to try to play off of the soft organic flowers and the hard-edged graphic image. But each occupies so much of its own space that neither one rises to the level of being the real subject of the picture. The flowers come close because when they're in the foreground, 2, they're much brighter, and 3, they're sharp. So that's kind of a good start on those. But the painting is so graphic and so much a part of this image that it really fights with that. So you need to make a decision. Pick one or the other to be your main thing and let the other stand in for comparison, for a way to contrast the characteristics of one part with the other. And then, to avoid some distraction, come down here and get rid of this sharp, spiky thing that's holding up the flowers. Clone it out. Do whatever you have to. This would be an easy thing to take out, but you need to do that. Interesting concept. Let's move on. Now here's another fascinating concept. This is listed as the maximum depth of field shot. It's impossible to tell that because there is nothing either in front of or behind these trees to indicate what actually might be within the depth of field. And at this distance, you could have done this without a great deal of closed aperture. It is an interesting graphic shot. I like the shot. It would make a good poster, and it would make a good postcard. Here would be the great thing, California Dreamin', coming to the land of the palm trees. There would be all kinds of things you could do with this shot. I think it could be the basis for a commercial shot. So I'm not saying it's a bad shot. I think it's a rather good one. But in terms of the assignment, it doesn't really show us which of the options this necessarily is. But it's a cool shot. Here we have a narrow depth of field shot with this bicycle tied to a tree or a post or a bush or something. I don't know. It's hard to tell what. It is a narrow depth of field. It does follow the guidelines of the depth of field shot. It's awfully busy. All of this stuff in here is competing with the fact that the bicycle itself is busy with all of these different lines and shapes. When you're wanting to contrast something that itself is busy, put it against something that is not. In this case, you could have helped this a lot with an even shallower depth of field where all of this background just went very, very soft. And that would have helped enormously. I think I can simulate that a little bit. Let me make a duplicate layer. I'll come down on this layer. We'll go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I would want this, if I were doing it, I would want it to really blur. So now we come back up to here, make it a layer mask. We use a black brush because it's a normal layer mask. First thing I'm going to do is come around this. I'm going to set this to 100% for this little demo, I'm not going to worry about getting into the basket, but I would if I was trying to do this for real. Now I purposely went over that line. Oh yeah, like I believe that. But it's going to let me come back and show you how we correct these things. So, no, I lied. I didn't do it on purpose, but it does give me an opportunity to show you something. Now, you get the idea. I would go around this whole thing to do this. With a slightly bigger brush. Okay, so we've got the background all blurred out. And again, I'm not going to bother about these little parts in here. Now, if I go in and change the brush back to a white brush, and I'm going to give it a somewhat harder edge, just so I can work a little more cleanly. Not totally, but some. Now I can go back on those areas that I overshot and clean them up. And by working these back and forth, by the way, this would be a whole lot easier to do. I'm going to use the X key to go back to the original. This would be a whole lot easier to do by zooming in on it where you've got a little better control. But with that, you can see this background is starting to drop out. It's not quite as intrusive as it was before. And what we can do, since this is that softened part, is we can take this layer and we can also, I'm just going to use the levels key to do it, we can also darken it a little so that the bike stands out. So there are ways we could bring that down. None of them are anywhere near as satisfactory, especially with an object like this, where in order to sell this, you'd have to get in and soften all of these parts in the basket, in the spokes of the bike, in all of these areas. This would be unbelievably tedious to pull off. Could you do it? Of course. Would you want to? I don't think so. So shooting it is the way to get it right. Well, this is nice. I assume we're back at Balboa Park with the stucco and terracotta. This is a nice piece. Very graphic, looking up these stairs, maximum depth of field. It's a nice image. I would commend you on it. I might straighten this line up. You've got all these nice straight railing lines. I might want to straighten this one up too. Because it's so different compared to everything else. It's almost a little bit distracting. I'd at least create two versions where I straighten one and then put them side by side and decided which one I like better. But other than that, the exposure is great. The composition really works. You've got strong leading lines in this. Very graphic shot. Nicely done. Well, here we have a cacti garden from somewhere. We've just got a lot of dead space in here. It does show narrow depth of field all on this first big spiny little devil. But again, you don't need all of this for the story. This background is out of focus. It could be a little more out of focus. I think it would be nicer if it were. But in any case, you don't need all of this. So to sell this story, really all you need is something like this. this is a nice little element coming forward in it. I would take that and then very subtly burn that foreground down a little. And maybe the background as well. Whoop, too much. So, there we go. Now we've got a shot of the cactus and the cactus garden where the foreground cactus is clearly the subject of our shot. Well, here we have two shots submitted as minimum and maximum depth of field. And they are, kind of, sort of. The problem is that it's simply the same shot with an aperture adjustment without a compensating shutter speed adjustment. So what's happening is here with the maximum depth of field, everything is dark, it's underexposed. The aperture was stopped down, but there's not enough shutter speed to lighten it up. And here, the aperture was opened up, so this is now overexposed. The background's actually relatively well exposed for what it is. But, so, it doesn't really work for us. So, I'd give serious thought to redoing this one at some point. Maybe for the portfolio, pick one. And if you're going to pick just one and you really think that one of these actually is a good shot, then make it a good shot, compose it well, and give it everything it needs to properly work. Okay, that's it for part one, or part three really, and we'll be back with part four once I get this edited and uploaded, and then we'll be right back. So take care.